Hi everyone, I'm Dustin from Zama Wellness, and in this video we're talking about how resistance training will improve bone density and make your bones stronger. Let's get into it. I'm sure by now you're well aware that resistance training increases muscle size and strength. This is important for a myriad of previously discussed reasons, and research shows that increased muscle mass and strength improves health outcomes and longevity. Simply put, there is an inverse relationship between muscle mass and all-cause mortality. That's great. We should all resistance train for bigger, stronger muscles. But that's not all it's good for. What about bones? After all, hip fractures in older adults significantly increases mortality. Well, resistance training is good for that too. Let's find out why. Resistance training puts a shearing force on the bones used in weight-bearing exercise, and this makes the bones adapt to this demand. A shearing force is one that applies force in opposing directions at different ends of the bone, and thus the bone must resist this force and strengthen itself to handle the demand. This type of force is the result of using a heavy training stimulus, which is why activities like yoga or cycling aren't as beneficial for bone health, although they're important for other reasons. The heavier the training stimulus, the more the bone has to reinforce itself. A simple example of shearing force would be a bicep curl. So if I have a dumbbell in my hand, that weight is producing some force downwards, and I have my bicep and my bicep tendon, and that's working against that force, that downward force. And so we have a force in two opposite directions working on this forearm bone here, right? So that's a shearing force, one direction and then the other direction. The bone's caught in the middle. The bone has to stabilize against that force. And so that communicates to the bone that it needs to be strong in order to handle that shearing force. Here we can apply the principle of progressive overload. Just like in strengthening muscles, we want to overload the bones little by little so that an adaptation occurs. This overloading communicates to the bones that they need to reinforce themselves, to mineralize. It's important to remember that the bones are living things that are constantly changing, just like other parts of the body, and they can get stronger and change as needed. However, as soon as you stop putting this demand on them, they start to weaken. Therefore, it's paramount that resistance training occurs consistently throughout life. After all, most bone production happens in the early stages of life, and in adulthood, it's really a game of just holding on to what we have. So it's best to resistance train throughout life to hold on to as much bone density as possible. So the takeaway here is that bones need to be strengthened too. The best way to do this is through resistance training because it places a shearing force on the bones that is unique to this type of exercise. Resistance training 2 or 3 times a week should be sufficient to reap these benefits. It's best to put the work in sooner rather than later because in adulthood, you're really not improving your bone density, rather you're holding on to what you have. But also, it's never too late to start. Do it now and it'll increase your likelihood of living an active and mobile lifestyle in your later years. Thanks for joining me, and make sure to check out our Substack on our website for more good stuff.